Challenger here from Challenger Breadware. I am here to show you how to make my Keep It Simple sourdough recipe. I developed this recipe over the last month or so for all you bakers out there who are struggling to get that kind of loaf that you're proud of to pull out of the oven, or when you pull it out of the oven, you're not as happy as you want to be. And for all those new bakers coming to sourdough, I've tried to create, or I have created, this very simple recipe for you. One of the most important things, just get everything that you need out in front of you before you start. So I've got my mixer here. It's an Ankershroom mixer. I've got the pieces that go in the Ankershroom mixer, which we'll talk about. I've got my flour, the 400 grams of flour that's called for in the recipe, 250 grams of water, 9 grams of salt, and the 80 grams of starter right here. I've got my 8x8 Pyrex dish, along with a dish cover, otherwise known as a hairnet, for covering my dish. Got a spray bottle for water, a spoon for getting my starter out, a temperature, which we'll definitely be talking about, and a towel for covering my bowl when we're done. So basically, when you want to start, all you need is flour, water, salt, and a starter, or what's really called a levain. Your flour, you can use any flour you want, really. There's a lot of great flour mills, local farmers and flour mills on our website. So you can find local flour if you want. You can use King Arthur flour from the grocery store. If you do, I'd recommend their organic bread flour. Makes great bread. Water just out of your tap. Salt can be any. I like extra fine salt. And then the levain that you can make, or your starter that you use when you're ready to feed it. First thing I want to do is actually take the temperature of my water and my flour. So you can see my water is 54 and my flour is 51. I'm going to be talking about the importance of temperature. It's really, besides these 4 ingredients, that's probably the most important thing to do. One of the things that I give you on the PDF that you can download is on the back. There are places where you can keep track of your loaf, you can keep track of your temperatures, which are very important, and some of the other things that we'll talk about throughout the process, and even rate how your bake is when we pull it out of the oven tomorrow morning. So I'm gonna write down my flour was 47, and my water, I already forgot, was 55. So I like to measure my flour and water the day before. I keep them in the refrigerator. The reason is, when you put your flour and water and you start mixing it up, the mixer heats everything up, and you want to get to a certain temperature, a temperature 73 that I'll talk about later. So the first thing you do is you just dump the water right in your mixer. Take your spoon, take out your starter. I made it this morning. You can see it's nice and holy. It's all ready to leaven bread. And I know there's a little more than 80 grams in here. Doesn't matter if you're missing a little bit or a little bit over, you're gonna be fine. I just know I don't have to scrape my jar completely when I put it in, and I know that I'll be close enough to 80 grams to really make a delicious loaf of bread. I'll turn my mixer on to probably medium speed. The reason I'm doing this here is what I wanna do is I want the starter to incorporate into the water to make it easier that it all blends together. One of the nice things about the Ankershroom is that you can move the arm to make it easier to blend. You can even move this breaker bar. So once again, it's just ideal for making bread. Once that's mixed in, you see it didn't really take much more than about 30 seconds. We're gonna add our flour slowly. And the reason I say don't dump it in all at once, it just won't mix in very well. What we're trying to do here is what they call hydrating the flour. And all that really means is you want to try to get all the flour particles to combine with the water. So by putting it in slowly, it's all going to be there. So in this stage, what bakers call an AUTOLYSE, we're going to combine the flour, water, and starter, and we're going to let it sit. But the key is, once again, you don't want the dry bits of flour. And as you can see, even without thinking about it, I just moved that mixer arm to help the flour mix right in with my dough. It'll start clumping up sometimes on the breaker bar. Once again, you can just move that. It really, really mixes dough nicely. You can just see it there in a really nice circular motion. It's very gentle on your dough. Bread baking is one of those processes, always nice to be gentle. And you can just move them around, trying to, you can see some kind of sticking to the bottom. I'll keep moving it. I move my breaker bar a little bit. And all we're trying to do, like I say, is just get the flour and water to mix together so there's no dry bits. It's looking like about done. And maybe a little bit more here. It goes well. So I'm going to turn the mixer off. I always scrape off the breaker bar. This also comes with a nice spatula for making bread. So I'll scrape this off into here. And one of the things you can do when you're making bread is you can actually watch the gluten develop. There's really no kneading in bread anymore. It's all done through time, which does the job as well, if not better than kneading. And once again, it's very gentle. But if you wet your hands at this stage, this is why I have a spray bottle here. You just pick up a chunk of your dough. Doesn't matter what size, let's say maybe like the size of a golf ball. And if you try to stretch it, it just pulls apart. This means, you know, the gluten, the water and flour have gone together, but the gluten hasn't done anything. If you don't know what that means, you'll learn later. As I pull it apart in 30 minutes, you'll be amazed at the difference in how that dough feels. Once again, it's time is doing the kneading for you. So I'm just gonna cover with a towel. Another thing I have sitting right here, and I will be back in 30 minutes, and we'll go to the next one. I forgot one thing. The thing that I do forget all the time, so sometimes I forget to add salt. It's always the next step that you add. And so what I do, so I don't forget it, even though it's sitting next to me, is I sprinkle it on the dough right now. That means there's no way there's been several times, maybe more than several times, where I forgot to put salt in my dough. Your dough won't come together. You won't be able to make bread. Bread needs that salt. So there you have it. I'll come back in 30 minutes. One of the ways I like to find out when to come back is I use my phone. It's about the only time I use Siri. I press the button and I say, hey Siri, remind me in 30 minutes to add salt. And the reminder's there in 30 minutes. So I will be back when my phone tells me to be back. I'm back. It's been 30 minutes. Actually, it's been probably 45. Life got a little busy, but it's one thing to remember. All these times are not really exact. So, you know, if it's 25, it's 45, you're gonna be fine. One thing I did forget to tell you at the very start, and that you can find on the back of your PDF, is a place to write down the time of each of the steps that you do and the temperature of your dough. And I forgot to tell you that. So at 9:55, the temperature of my dough is 67. And the good thing about the 9:55, and to write it down, is that's exactly when what's called your bulk fermentation starts. So if you can keep your dough at 73, which is the temperature that I recommend, you'll know that your dough will be ready to pre-shape 6 hours from 9:55 or 3:55 this afternoon. So now the dough has been sitting here. One thing that I'll show you, just the difference of what happens with time. If you remember how the last time I did it, when I picked up a sort of a golf ball sized piece of dough, it didn't really come together. It just kind of fell apart. Now look at what happens to the flour and water now that it's just been sitting by itself on its own. The reason that it stretches is that's the gluten developing. Yes, it tears a little, so you want to get to the point where it doesn't tear, especially a jagged tear, but we haven't even mixed yet, and the dough is already starting to look fantastic. So I'll plop that back in. What we're going to do now is we're going to mix it at low speed for 5 minutes. And on low speed on the Ankerstrom is 2 p.m. on the clock face. So I'll put it to 2 p.m. We'll mix it for 5 minutes. And then we'll mix it for 3 minutes at sort of a medium high speed. So we're just gonna let that mix. And so I guess while it's mixing, I'm gonna talk about the importance of temperature. It's the reason why I said it really is the most important ingredient besides your flour, water, salt, and yeast. Temperature is gonna let you decide or determine how long fermentation takes. That's one of the things I struggled with for years. Every baker sort of struggles with it. You get better at it, but they're always like, how do I know when it's done? How do I know when it's done? I've learned that if you keep your dough around 73 degrees Fahrenheit, it's going to be done in 6 hours. It's why I started with cold flour and cold water, is because I know at the end of this mixing period, hopefully it's gonna be close to 73. But what do you do if your dough is too warm? One of the things that I do is I'll throw it in my refrigerator for 3, 4, 5 minutes. It really cools down quickly. A degree or two will cool down very quickly. You can use your thermometer. You can use your freezer or your refrigerator. You can put it on top of your stove, which might be a little warmer. Sometimes the closet in our bedroom is a little warmer. So you can move around your house and you'll learn where the temperatures are a little cooler, a little warmer by windows. And so that's why temperature is so important. It's really gonna help you to understand your proof. And if you keep track of your time, and let's say I did it in 6 hours, you kept it around 73, but you didn't like the way your bread turned out, you can say, I'll go a little less, I'll go a little more. But this bread will turn out, it'll turn out great, but there's always more to learn with sourdough, and so that's the reason to keep track of what you're doing. So I'm gonna let this, finish this 5 minutes. I'm then gonna let it go 3 minutes at a medium-high speed, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let it rest for 5 minutes. And I'll tell you about that why when I come back. I'm back. It's been 5 minutes of mixing at low, 3 minutes of mixing at medium, and then we let it rest for 5 minutes. The reason I told you to let it rest is because I'm gonna pull another window, and if you pull a window right when it's done mixing, your dough is gonna be kind of hard because it's been mixing, it's kind of heated up, and so if you give it that 5 minutes of rest, it'll really give you an idea of what the gluten looks like. First thing I'm gonna do is take the temperature. As I said, take it at every step of the way. Maybe it'll be better. Well, I can do it. Take the temperature, 77. So look, so it got maybe my water. The best way to cool it down is to use cooler water the next time, and that's why we wrote it down. So 78. So I'm actually gonna write down 78. And after I put it in the Pyrex dish that I'll show you, I am going to put it in my refrigerator for probably 5, maybe 8 minutes, because I'd like it to go down, probably 10 minutes, because I'd like it to go down about 5 degrees to get to my 73. So now the first thing I want to do is, like I said, pull off like a golf ball sized chunk of bread with wet hands. I forget to tell you that, but you see me spraying. And now look how beautiful your dough is getting. Look at how you can see right through it. You can get it nice and thin. All you gotta do is move around. You can poke at it with your thumb. And that means your gluten's getting nice and strong. It's gonna give you a great loaf of dough. And part of the keep it simple method that I developed, you don't need to do a lot of folds. I think this bread would turn out great with no folds. I like to fold it once because it kind of organizes the gluten strand in a sense. I wet my hands, and then you can just pull the dough away from the roller, and as you can see, it just pulls away nicely. That also is a good indication that your gluten has been nicely developed during mixing. So I pulled away from the dough. The dough is very clean. One thing I'll tell you is always clean your implements that have dough on them right when you're done, because bread is really hard to clean, or dough is really hard to clean if you don't. I'll spray with the scraper a little bit, and then I'll just scrape around. It'll come out really, really easily out of the bowl, into your hands. There, and once again, it's a really nice dough. It's because it's so strong. We've mixed it well. You can touch it with your hands. I mean, I move a little fast. You will learn if you stick on it, it's gonna stick to you. But if you move your hand fast, and so I just like to organize it a little bit into sort of a ball. I mean, not much. And then what I'm gonna do, I'll put it right here in my Pyrex dish. You see, it sticks a little bit, but not much. Way less sticky than dough with a lot of water in it. We already took the temperature. I wrote it down. Didn't I say 78? I thought I did. I wrote down 75, but you know those things happen. I'll cover it with the bowl cover, otherwise known as a hairnet. The other thing that you can do sometimes is it tends to fall down and stick to the top of your dough. So you can kind of just pick it up, leave a little air pocket, and then it'll stay up and it won't get stuck to your dough. It's not a big deal if it sticks to your dough, but it's just nicer if it doesn't. So what I'm gonna do now, I'll pull out my phone again. I'm gonna give it one turn. So I'm gonna remind myself to do that again. Remind me in 1 hour to turn. So I'll get a reminder from my phone in an hour to turn. And I know it's a little bit warmer, but once again, if you look back at the notes I took, at 9:55 I started, So at 355, if I was around 73, it'd be done. I think it's gonna be a little warmer. So I'm gonna, about 315, I'm gonna come back to you. I guess I'll show you the folding, but at 315, we'll check out the dough. Okay, I'm back. We're here for the next fold. I'm pulling my phone out of the pocket. One of the things to do is always keep track of time. I know I told you I was gonna do it in an hour. Once again, time got away from me. It doesn't matter. This dough is really strong. You only need one fold. You don't have to worry so much about it. So it's 1240 about. I'm gonna write down 1240 on my sheet here. And one of the things that I also wrote is I put it into the refrigerator for 10 minutes. So you remember my dough was 78 degrees, even though I don't write very well. So I'm hoping my 10 minutes in the refrigerator brought it down really nicely. You can't really check the temperature right out of the refrigerator because it's kind of around the dough on the outside and the inside, and it's not all the way there. So this will be the best time to check. So the first thing I do, once again, spray bottle, wet your hands. You know, wet them good. Kind of go around there, get them inside your fingers. And we're gonna pull a gluten window again. I told you it's really important. It helps you really understand what's happening. This time I'm not gonna pull off a piece of dough. I'm just gonna pull it up and just look how beautiful it's starting to look. How thin it gets. You can almost see through it. You see that little rip I tried to hide, but I don't need to hide it. It's nice and clean. If it was jagged, that would mean that your gluten's not really developing well. So I'd say the dough is working really nicely. You almost don't really need to do a fold in this dough, but as I said, I do like to do it. So the best way to do a fold, I'm gonna wet them again one more time because I'm talking. You wanna sort of take your two fingers, your two middle fingers, you're gonna wanna put them underneath the dough and get them to touch right in the middle. I guess I do it, I don't think about it, about a third of the way into my loaf. And so I put my two fingers under, and then I pull up, and then what you want to do is kind of pull it back towards you, and you see how the dough is stretching. That's what you're trying to do, is trying to stretch the dough that helps your gluten build strength. I'm going to do it one more time because it kind of looks a little wonky. So I pull it up, pull it back a little, give it a little stretch. Turn the dish 180 degrees. Once again, take your two middle fingers, put them about a third of the way, get them to touch in the middle, you pull up, and then pull towards you and give your dough a little bit of a stretch. I'll do it one more time. And then you just kind of tuck it under. I guess I didn't say that part. So now this is where on a really strong dough like this, it's sometimes hard to get a fold on both sides, a coil fold, but we'll do our best. And once again, about a third of the way, touch my middle fingers in the middle, I pull up, and then sometimes I gotta help tuck it under. So I tuck it under. On this one, to me, it doesn't look like I really get a fold. So instead, I'm just gonna pick the whole thing up because I just want it to be even. So you can still get a little bit of a stretch. I'll let it dangle a minute. That also stretches it. And then I'll just kind of fold it down and fold it over. You don't have to be precise. It's not this big deal that everybody tells you about, oh, folds, how do you do folds? Lots of way to fold. I happen to like this one. It's called a coil fold. The thing that I really like that you can see, it starts to form a nice rectangle. The better shape your dough keeps throughout your fermentation process, the better time you're gonna have during shaping. So I'd say that's a nice little package there. Now I'm gonna do, once again, I'm gonna check the temperature. Hopefully my 10 minutes in the refrigerator got me closer to where I like it to be, but it's not that big a deal. Oh, look, so it's 71, 72. So 10 minutes was a little long to go down 5 or 6 degrees. So I was gonna do 8. I chickened out, decided on 10. Now it's a little colder, so I'm gonna write down 71 over here. So I'd still say between, a little warm at the start, maybe a little cooler now. I bet my 6 hours is still gonna be pretty close. So we'll just cover it back up. I go stick it in my room, maybe find a little bit warmer spot to see if I can warm it up a little bit. And I will come back. Let's talk about that time again. If you remembered, you wrote out the time you AUTOLYSE. This is the start of your bulk fermentation. So 6 hours from 9:55 is about when it's gonna be done. So at 3:55, I'm kind of guessing again because of the temperature might be a little longer. If this dough stays around 71, you could even check it in an hour. Maybe I'll come back and check it. But somewhere around 3:55, this dough will be ready for pre-shaping. So I'll be back then. Maybe part way through, I'll take one temperature and we'll see how it's doing. to pre-shape the dough. If I look at my iPhone, it's 3:55, which is kind of funny. That's exactly 6 hours from when I said 6 hours would be about 73. It might be a little bit early, but it just kind of works for me. You don't have to worry that much about the time. But the good thing is, if you track the time, you can learn as you look at your dough and say, oh, I probably should have gone a little longer. So the next time you do it, you'll say, okay, so I went a little short that time, depending on my temperature. Next time I'll go a little longer. And that just comes from experience. Don't worry about it. Like I said, I know this will make good dough. Even if I was a little bit too long, a little bit too short, it's gonna make a great loaf of dough tomorrow. You can look at it. It still got a nice shine to the surface. And so the first thing we're gonna do is you're gonna take a plastic bench scraper, and what we wanna do is loosen the dough around all the edges, just so it's easy to come out of the container. I'll take my spray bottle again, I'll spray on both sides, and I can use both sides. And what I do is I'm just going around the outside of the dough, trying to loosen it up a little bit. Usually I go around twice. The reason I spray both sides is it starts to stick. If it's sticking to your plastic scraper, then just spray it again. The water's not gonna hurt your dough. If anything, like I say, it's gonna help your dough. You're trying not to be too rough with it. You wanna be gentle with your dough so that it comes out nice, because there's a lot of gas trapped in, and that gas is what's going to give you that beautiful loaf of bread when we pull it out of the oven tomorrow morning. So then I've loosened it. Now I'll wet my hands, as I always do before touching dough. Wet my hands, get it around my fingers, and now I'll take my fingers and go around the dough and loosen it up a little bit more. And you can pretty much, you'll get it loose, then you can just take your hands and just gently get your fingers underneath, pull it up, and put it on your bench. Here, my bench is a little bit short because I'm using a cutting board because it's the right place. And you can see here, if you look at the little bits that's stuck, you can see some nice structure and webbing, and that says you probably got some good fermentation into your dough. And so the pre-shape, once again, with this dough, it should be fairly easy because the dough is going to be very easy to manage. It's a little far away. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So I'm just going to pick it up and move it a little closer. I should have wet my bench knife, but I didn't remember there, but you see it sticks a little bit more. Now the pre-shaping is not as hard as it looks. I found a really nice method. If you put it kind of at a 90-degree angle to here, and then you angle it up just a little bit, kind of press down, and then you just push it away from you, and it starts to form a nice shape. If it's sticking to your dough like mine is, I'll wet my bench knife a little bit. And then here you go 90 degrees, and then we'll tilt it this way just a little bit. So each time you go around 4 times, we'll tilt it a little more into a circle. So that's the way you'll do it. So you push down, push it away from you. And I find it's usually about 2 feet. Like I said, I don't quite have enough room. Sometimes it sticks to the bench. You can just pick that up and move it off. Then I'll do it again. I'll move it here. I'll angle it just a little bit, and now pull it toward me. And as you can see, and you can take your hand and push it there, it's starting to become a nice circle. This last push should give you basically a really nice circle of dough. You could probably stop here. The one thing I do like to do a little bit is I push here, and I use my fingers, if you can see, and I'm gonna tuck right underneath the dough here. I'm gonna tuck it in as I kind of push and turn my bench knife. I'll do that again. I'll push it underneath, push it, tuck it in with your fingers, and then pull it a little bit toward you. One more time, push, turn a little, tuck it in, pull it a little toward you. Not quite circular. I'll do it one more time. It's usually 3 or 4 times, and I just like to get a nice circle. You can see some nice gas bubbles here. You don't really need them. You can pop them, but it means the dough has been fermenting very nicely. So I kind of move that to the middle of my board. I will take a damp towel, which I forgot to dampen. I like to do a little damp towel. I do it right here in the sink. My wife Lisa probably liked that I'm using the sink in the video now. But here we are. I squeeze out my towel. I'm gonna put it on top of the dough. And the reason that it's damp is you don't want your dough to dry out, especially with this dough, because there's not that much water in there. You just kind of put it down, take my iPhone again and say, hey Siri, remind me in 15 minutes to shape my dough. So I'll be back in 15 minutes and we'll shape this baby, put it in a banneton and put it in the refrigerator overnight. Back again, time to now shape the dough. I will write 4:15 down on my notes over here as the time that we shape the dough. Should be very easy to shape. Once again, this is the reason I had created this recipe for you, is lots of doughs are very hard to shape. People start putting lots of flour on their bench, and you're gonna find that this dough is gonna be very easy to shape. We're not gonna need any flour on the bench, which is really just a cutting board in this case. I will dust it with, I call it dusting flour. It's really a combination, like 50-50 rice flour and regular flour. It just helps. The rice flour has a little bit bigger granules, helps your dough kind of roll around. So I'll take like the little strainer like you'd use in the kitchen and just dust, a light dusting on top of the dough. You can pat it in, not gonna hurt it if you touch your dough. Take your bench knife, and what you wanna do is you're gonna slip underneath, put it up, and the thing to remember when you're shaping is this side of the dough is not gonna be sticky at all. The underside of the dough where there's no flour, that's gonna be sticky, so you always wanna be touching the top of the dough. So I'll put the bench knife under, and then I'll flip it over onto my hand, and then just lay it onto the bench. And once again, this side of the dough would be a little sticky. This dough's not so bad because of the recipe and not a lot of flour, so once again, it's gonna be easy. And now all I'm trying to do, I pat it down just a little bit. As I said before, it's nice to keep it in a nice shape. The nicer shape your dough is in, the nicer shape your loaf's gonna become. So we got pretty much of a nice rectangle here. And it's very easy to shape. Take your hands, you pick up the bottom of the dough, pull it out a little bit. It's a very strong dough, won't pull a lot, and you just flip it over, pat it down a little bit. It sticks to itself nicely. There's no dough on my hand. It's a very, very nice dough to look at. And once again, look at the shape. This is what you want to do. You even see the shape of this, big in the middle, curves down here. The more symmetrical you are here, the more symmetrical you are here, the better your loaf's gonna look in the long run. Then you wanna take your hands. I try to make them look, you want your hands to kind of go, we're gonna try to get them under the dough, but you want them to be under the dough in the same spot. So you put your hand, you just kind of push your finger under, get your hands underneath. I like to get, you know, my two little fingers are now touching. I'll get my thumbs kind of here, and you don't want to squeeze, you just want to be gentle. What we're going to do is just pull the dough out on both sides without a lot of squeezing. Flip this dough over, you know, I guess it's kind of sort of toward the middle, and then we'll pull a little bit again here and flip it right there, almost on top of my hand. It's not going to stick. I'll pull my hand out and then pat the dough. And now you see, it's starting to feel a little lopsided to me. So, but the dough doesn't stick. It's not hard to work with. You can just straighten it out, and see, with just a little straightening, I've got a nice rectangular package again. And then once again, we'll take our hands. What we're gonna do is we're gonna flip it up. So I'll pick it up from this end, pull it out a little bit, kind of helps just create a little tension. Flip it over anywhere, you know, I guess it's pretty near the end, and you kind of push it down a little bit with your fingers once again, but you want to be gentle, but it's okay. You're not going to ruin your dough if you push it down too much. And now it's called sort of a tuck and roll. What we're going to do is we're going to put my hands here. I'm going to put my thumbs right on the flap, if you can see it. It's sticking just a little bit. I'll take my knife here just to do it. Probably because I'm just taking a little bit too long. It won't stick if you go faster. So I push my thing, and what I'm gonna do is roll it over, push my thumbs underneath, and once again, because I'm on top of the dough, my thumbs come out clean. The dough's not sticky, very easy to do. So now the dough is sitting here. You could see a seam over here, and now what we're gonna do is kind of roll it a little bit further, keeping your hand on the outside of the dough, and then push your thumbs underneath. I'm gonna figure out a better way to video this. You just push it underneath, and what you're trying to do, the thought that you want to think about is you want the seam, like there's a seam here, you want it to be right in the middle of your dough. So there we go, we've got a nice, once again, rectangular shape of dough. And then you gotta close up the ends. This is harder, I think, than it looks. I'm worse on my left hand than I am on my right hand. But the easiest way to do this is you take a flap of dough, and kind of just pull it over to the top. You can kind of push it down. Then I take my fingers, and what you're trying to do is you want to close up so it's nice and short. So I take my thumb and my index finger and I pinch toward the middle and then tuck it underneath. And you get a pretty nice clean dough, which will help you get a nice clean shape in the morning when we bake it up tomorrow. We've got the Banneton that we need. You don't even really need to dust it here. The less dusting flour, I find you're more likely to get a little bit blistery loaf. Not quite there, but what you want to do is take your bench knife, and what we're trying to do is to flip it over. And I always try to push a little because you'll get a little tension into your dough, and you just flip the dough over. You can see it's sealed up nicely, and then you kind of take your two hands again, kind of like you're getting underneath, and you want to get your hands underneath and very gently lift up the dough, go right in the center of your Banneton. I like to drop one edge first, I drop the other edge, and there you have it. There's our beautiful loaf of dough. We'll take our now what are called Banneton covers. We will cover our Banneton, and kind of like the resting before, we're gonna let it sit at room temperature for 15 minutes. It just lets the dough relax a little bit. We're gonna put it in the refrigerator overnight. I like to keep my refrigerator around 39 degrees Fahrenheit, which if I remember is 4 degrees Celsius, for 12 to 15 hours. And then tomorrow morning, I will show you how you bake it up, and I'm hoping it'll look as beautiful as you want your loaf to look. Hi, I'm back. It's now been 15 hours since I last baked. I look at my watch, I write it down on the piece of paper here that we're putting in the oven at 750, so it's been 15 hours and 10 minutes. I think I said yesterday, I like kind of that 12 to 15 hour range, seems to give you the best bread. I've got my tools ready, as I said, get everything in place. So I've got my dough, my oven mitts, a couple of ice cubes. I think really helps when you got low hydration dough. And I've got my lamb, I like a curved lamb. One thing you can do, you can see that I actually make a little X with a Sharpie on there, kind of telling me that I've used that edge. I find I can probably get 10 to 20 scores, probably even more, before I switch to a new side of the blade. So we take the cover off. Oh, and the pan has been preheated in the oven at 500 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is 260 Celsius, but I don't remember. Here's our dough. It's looking very nice inside the Banneton. It rose, got into a nice shape, and kind of came away from the edges. So I think it's looking good. Sometimes it puffs up a little bit more. That's one thing you'll find. You'll get to know what the dough looks like when you pull it out of the refrigerator every morning. So I think we're all ready. I'll put on my oven mitts and we'll go to the oven. Take the pan out of the oven, put it on my stove. I take the cover off. I take my mitts off. Then you can easily just kind of turn your dough out into the oven. Sometimes because when I'm using ice cubes, since the pan is plenty large, I put it near the very top. Try to get it nice and centered, and that gives me some room for my ice cubes down here to keep it away as much as I can from the dough. I get my lamb. The scoring, you'll find this bread easy to score. I've learned so much about scoring since I started here. So I kind of start at the top, almost in the middle of the loaf, and I envision what I want my blade to do. I want it to come in at just a little nice curve and then end up over here. And I kind of see that the lamb is almost perpendicular or parallel to the pan. So I start here, and then you just want to go, you don't have to go fast, but you don't want to go super slow. You just kind of like breathe in, then breathe out. You go, and you just score it there. You can see it's starting to open up nicely. Hopefully it'll turn into a good loaf. I bring my ice cubes over, put my gloves on. I rest my ice cubes right here in the edge of the pan. They start steaming nicely to give a little extra steam to a low hydration loaf. Put the cover back on, pick it up, place it right back in the oven, close the door. I then turn my oven down to about 435. I'm sorry, I don't remember the Celsius there. So I set 2 alarms for myself. The first one, 15 minutes. That's when the steam has finished doing its job of helping your dough rise. So we'll take the cover off. I'll come back, you'll see that. We'll take the cover off, then we'll let it bake for an additional 30 minutes, and hopefully we'll have the perfect loaf that makes you happy when you pull it out of the oven. Okay, I'm back. It's been 15 minutes. This is the moment of truth, what bakers call the big reveal. You open the oven, you take off the cover. I found the best thing, sometimes bread. Let's talk about the big reveal first. So there you go. The loaf is opened up nicely, and you can see the ear forming, the crust forming. Sometimes in cast iron, your bottom will get too dark. I found the easiest way is just to plop the base in the top of the cover upside down, put it right back in the oven, and the extra air under there keeps your loaf from getting too dark. So we'll put that back in the oven. I will be back in 30 minutes, and then we get the real reveal, and we'll see how our crust formed. All right, we're back. Time to take the loaf out of the oven. This is the big time when you're hoping to be happy with everything the way it looks. I'd say it looks good right now. Let's bring it over and we'll do a little evaluation of it. One of the things I found, and one of the things I put on the PDF that you can download, is just a way of kind of looking at your loaf and trying to evaluate it. Your evaluations can be different than mine. It's kind of personal, so you can see how you do from bake to bake. So the first one I'd say, I call it the oven spring and rise. To me, it looks a little lower than I think it should be, but I think the shape is nice. I gave you a scale of 1 to 10. I'm gonna give myself an 8 on that. Then we've got the bloom, or how it opens up. I'd say, I think it looks really nice. I never know how to evaluate myself either, so I'll give myself an 8 again. The color of the crust, I'm actually very happy. This is the thing that you have to decide for yourself. Some bakers like it darker, some bakers like it lighter. You can bake it a little bit less time, a little bit more time. It's really what you want to eat. So in my case, I like a little char in the ear. I like it to be a little bit dark. So I'm gonna say I'm giving myself a 10 on the color of this loaf. I think it's beautiful. And then my score, how did I do in my score? I look at it from kind of end to end. How did it open up? I like that it opened up. It got a little char. You got some nice structure going on here. I'd say I'm very happy with my score. I'll give myself a 10. Crispiness, you can kind of tap your loaf. So you get a nice bottom. This is part of what I was talking about why to put the bottom of the pan in your pan. Sometimes this will get too dark. If yours doesn't, you don't need to take that step. So the crispiness, I think the bread feels very nice. I'll give myself a 10 there now. So the next step is you want to let your loaf cool. I'd say a minimum of a half an hour. It'll still be warm inside. It'll be delicious, so I love it then. To really get it cooled properly probably takes a couple of hours, but I think we'll come back in about a half an hour. We'll let the loaf, it'll continue to bake a little bit. We'll let the loaf continue to bake. We'll do the big reveal, we'll cut it, we'll look at it, and we'll evaluate our crumb. We'll take a bite, and we'll evaluate what it tastes like. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. It's time to cut the bread. I know I said I was waiting 30 minutes, but I'm starving. It's morning, so it's been 20 minutes. Bread's gonna be warm. It'll still be delicious. I want you to know this is the first cut video I've really ever done. My buddy Chris Lem has been asking me to do one of these probably for the last 4 years, and I've always been chicken, so I hope it's gonna be good. I'm using this really cool sourdough knife by another bread baking buddy called Richard Harris. So we are gonna see. Oh, and the one thing I forgot to notice, and I'm gonna add it to my PDF before you get it, is everybody loves a blistery loaf. I started getting some good blisters here. I think sometimes on the low hydration loaf, I don't get them as good as I used to get them on the loaves with more water, but you can still get a nice blistery crust. So what you're gonna do is take your knife, use the whole part of your knife, and you just want to do sort of a quick slice down. You can even tell, so I would say it feels like it's gonna be a pretty good crumb. So here we go, my first one ever. How'd we do? I'd say that looks pretty good. You can tell, I think it's because it's warm, it's a little bit more closed than it would be if it had fully cooled, but I know it's gonna be delicious. I'm about ready to slather it with butter. We'll pull out our sheet here and say, so how did we do? I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm very happy with that. I'll give myself a 9. I wish it was a little bit less dense in parts, but once again, remember the evaluation is you versus yourself. Don't evaluate it compared to mine. Evaluate it compared to how you did the last time or how you want it to be, but not comparing to other bakers. So I'm going, I guess I should just cut a slice here because you're supposed to do flavor. So here, I'm gonna cut a slice, tell you how it tastes. I can say it feels really, really nice. I will give you my favorite bite on a loaf of bread is I like the bite that comes out of the ear and a little bit of crumb. So there it is. I think it's good. Crust is really nicely thin. I got a little bit of flavor from the char on the ear, which I love. A little bit of crumb. It was nice and soft. It's a winner. Hope you guys all go out there and bake your KIS bread. I'm telling you, you're gonna be so happy like I was pulling it out of the oven. Thank you for watching.